source of truth about war in the world today. And I'm very glad he's regularly here on the Mother of All talk show. Scott Ritter, thanks for joining us. Let's start with Gaza, but I also want to talk to you about Ukraine. I don't know if anybody remembers Ukraine. We spent a few $100 billion on it, but it's disappeared from the news agenda, and I want to ask you why and what's happening there. But let's start with the Iwo Jima moment, or the Reichstag Soviet flag moment, when Israeli soldiers, having conquered the Al-Shifa hospital, climbed up onto the roof and planted their flag there. An ignominious moment, an ignominious end to a quite atrocious set of war crimes and crimes against humanity. At least that's how I see it. How about you?
Absolutely. Look, the Israeli Defense Force has brought nothing but shame to it during the course of this entire campaign. Let's just be straight up honest. They were beat in a stand-up fight on October 7th by Hamas, and they were humiliated. And that humiliation is carried over into this operation that's taking place. This operation has very little to do with actually trying to accomplish legitimate military objectives, and everything to do with exacting revenge on a helpless Palestinian people, because that's what Israel is up against. Hamas, after carrying out what I call the most successful military raid this century, because it wasn't an act of terrorism. What Hamas did on October 7th was a classic military raid with classic military objectives, and they accomplished them all. Then they withdrew to prepared positions. That's the final act of a raid. Their prepared positions happen to be underground, as they are wont to be if you want to survive with Israeli air supremacy, etc. And Israel has gone into Gaza knowing that they're not going to close with and destroy the Hamas enemy through firepower maneuver in classic military terms, that they're going to instead carry out collective punishment against the citizens of Gaza, the innocent Palestinian people. And they're not even hiding it now. In addition to these horrific visuals, I mean, raising the flag over a hospital. Really, look, I come from an organization whose defining moment is characterized by Marines raising the flag on Mount Suribachi. Of the 250 Marines that went up that mountain, 27 lived. 27 out of 250, because it was a real war. A real war. We earned the right to plant that flag on Mount Suribachi. These Israelis that put the flag above the Al-Shifa hospital, they should be ashamed of themselves. I hope that their pictures are taken, that their faces are recognized and broadcast around the world. So wherever they go to try and get somebody to buy them a beer for being a man, for raising the flag, instead people will spit in their face, because that's all they deserve if they can walk out of Gaza alive, because this battle ain't over yet. Hamas is still there. There's a lot of fighting left. George, I don't want to sound like I'm glorifying war. I'm not. My ideal solution right now is a ceasefire that brings an end to this conflict, gets the Israeli troops out of Gaza, gets peacekeeper troops in Gaza, and gets humanitarian supplies to the people that so desperately need it, so that the international community can begin the business of talking about how do we make sure that this never happens again. That should be everybody's priority. It should have been Israel's priority on October 8th. Not to say how do we exact revenge, but how do we prevent this from happening again? How do we prevent an October 7th from ever happening again? Because everything that's transpired since October 7th has turned international opinion away from Israel. Had Israel taken a different stance on October 8th, a stance that said, we understand why this happened, this is painful for us, but we need now to recognize that the Palestinian people have to have a homeland. The only way to disarm Hamas is to give the Palestinian people a homeland. And then Hamas loses its right, its need for militancy. But that's not what Israel's doing. They claim they're trying to defeat Hamas. But understand this, Hamas isn't just fighters to be killed. It's an idea. It's an ideology that has taken root now. If you wanted to kill Hamas, Israel, you're doing the exact worst thing, because Hamas now is being embraced by people who never would have embraced Hamas. The idea of Palestinian statehood is now mainstream like it's never been before. George, this is the greatest defeat Israel has ever suffered, and they don't know it yet.
How much revenge will satisfy Netanyahu? It's 11,000 dead now, 74.5% of them women, children, and elderly people. Is 22,000 dead, 52,000 dead? How many dead will it take to satisfy that thirst for revenge? Because you're right, they cannot, even Israel cannot kill 2.3 million people. Even our brain-dead politicians could not stand by whilst 2.3 million people were killed. So the killing is going to have to stop short of killing every Palestinian. The question is now, how far short?
Well, the problem is, George, and you know this, the Israeli government has been hijacked by literally this criminal right-wing element that is imbued with a notion of Israel that nobody in the world supports, nobody in the world can support. The notion of a greater Israel, and that's Israel, one that has no Palestinian people. You know, Hamas, and again, I understand, but is condemned for, from the river to the sea, because people interpret that as anti-Semitic. You want to annihilate the Jewish population. But you know who invented it, George? You know who invented it. The Likud party invented it. It's the original motto of the Likud party. From the river to the sea, no Palestinians there will be. That's their theme. That's what they do. And now they have a government that is bringing this to life. So when you say how many, George, all. They want them all gone. Every single one of them, and they're not even hiding it now. These rabbis are preaching to the troops, saying, get them all, kill them all, get rid of them all. The Israeli government is talking about getting them all out of Gaza, driving them out somewhere. They don't care because they don't view the Palestinians as humans. I mean, this is the worst aspect of what's going on here. Politics is tough. You know that. You're a politician. And sometimes people take hard stands and bad things are done. But this isn't politics, George. This is hate. This is pure, unadulterated hatred. And what kills me is no matter how you feel about Hamas, you have to understand that you can't embrace an action undertaken by Israel that dehumanizes an entire people. The Israelis are not crying about the babies, George. The Israelis are not crying about the women. They're definitely not crying about the men. They don't care. They've hardened themselves to the point where they no longer view the Palestinians as humans. And as so long as your government and my government have this see no evil, hear no evil, say no evil approach about Israel, where Israel cannot be criticized, the killing will continue. The only way this stops is when our politicians demand that it stops. But we, so far, don't seem to have an upper limit, which speaks volumes about the people whom we have put in office. We are democracies, George. We elect people to represent us. And if those people truly represent us, it doesn't say much about us collectively as Americans and British, because we're standing by. Yes, we fill the streets with people demonstrating, and I applaud everybody who went out to demonstrate. But we need to step it up. And I'm not talking about violence, George. I'm all in on the nonviolent thing nowadays, because war only begets death and destruction. I've learned that hard lesson. I'm about not going to war. But we need to find a way to send a signal to these people. Where is corporate America? Where are the donors? Where are the people that give money to the politicians that get them into office? Why aren't they calling up? Why aren't we calling them saying, hey, you do a business that allows you to make money, to donate money to a politician? You don't do business anymore, pal, until you get on the phone and you say, stop the killing in Gaza. That's what we have to do. We have to stop it now. Every day we don't do this, George, you know what's going on. Hundreds of Palestinians are dying, but we stopped caring.
Yeah.
Once you see those photographs, you become immune to those photographs. And that's what's happened. It's a bloodlust exhaustion where we have seen so much horror. It's filled our eyes and filled our minds that we become numb to it. We can't become numb to it. We should cry ourselves to sleep every night in shame, collective shame about what's happening in our names, because this isn't an Israeli crime, George. This is an American crime. This is a British crime. This is a European crime. This is a global crime. Every human being on this planet is guilty of killing these people because we're not doing anything to stop them. The damn Arabs and Muslims met in Riyadh and didn't do a damn thing. Excuse my language. I apologize using French on your show, but they didn't do anything, George. Nothing. They talked. But when they had the chance to use the one weapon that could actually turn the tide, the oil weapon, they wouldn't even consider it because money is more important than blood, apparently.
Wow. Well, that soliloquy will live long, I predict. Let me ask you to, if you will, segue to that war that everyone's now forgotten about, the one that completely dominated more than a year of our lives, filled all the information space, got people banned and suppressed and censored, and you and me among them. That war that was so important that we must impoverish our economies to influence the outcome, must pony up hundreds of billions of dollars to keep going. What's happened to that war?
George, about a month ago, I did an interview with a Ukrainian journalist. She's from the Donbass, but she's ethnic Russian, but Ukrainian, and a lot of connections with the Ukrainian community. And I told her straight up, I said, you do understand that no one in the West likes you. No one cares about you. That don't misinterpret our willingness to give you money and equipment and everything. All we're using you as is a tool to hurt Russia. But we don't care about the price you pay. We care nothing about you collectively or as a people. And when the time comes, we will drop you just like we drop everybody else. For decades, we spoke about how important it was to be in Afghanistan. If we don't fight them over there, George, we have to fight them here. This is the most important. This is an existential struggle. This defines who and what we are collectively. This fight in Afghanistan, and then bam, gone. Overnight, finished. We don't even talk about Afghanistan anymore, and we should, because of the horrors that we've inflicted on those people that continue to this day. But we've forgotten about them because we never really cared about them, George. We don't care about the Ukrainian people. And what's happened right now is we have found a brighter laser beam to chase. You know how you take a kitten in a room and you shine the laser beam on the wall and the cat gets distracted? We just got distracted by the Israeli laser beam, and we ain't coming back to Ukraine. This was a losing proposition for a long time. Politically, it was difficult to acknowledge it, but now Israel has provided political cover for people to say, well, we have a bigger priority, especially in the United States. It's over for Ukraine, George. Now, when I say over, understand, and I point this out to everybody. In World War II, the United States, we lost a lot of guys. Not anywhere near what the Soviet Union lost, but we lost a lot of guys. The bloodiest month for the American Army in Europe, the bloodiest month, wasn't the Battle of the Bulge, wasn't Normandy, wasn't the battle for France. It was April 1945, after it was all over, because the Germans still fought. They went down kicking and screaming. They fought for every inch. And we lost more men in April 1945 than we lost in any other month in the war. And the reason why I bring that up is people can look at the violence that's going on right now between the Russians and Ukrainians. It's still a very violent war. I've just interviewed a couple guys from the front line, and the stories they tell will bring you to tears. But Russia has won this war. The war is over. It's fundamentally over. It's strategically over. The military math cannot be reversed by Ukraine. They are simply burning through manpower and equipment at a far greater rate than it can be replenished. And now the United States is turning off the spigot. They're down to about 2% left of the available funding, and Congress isn't in any rush to give them any more money. Germany has ponied up a great big $8 billion package that includes 10 old tanks. I mean, again, I feel sorry because 10 old tanks equates into 50 dead Ukrainians. 5 men per tank. The tanks will be destroyed. That's it. But we don't care. We never have cared about Ukraine, and that's the fact. We are going to wake up sometime in the near future to find that Russia has determined the outcome of this war on terms that are acceptable to Russia, that they will dictate these terms to a defeated Ukrainian state, and the West will have no say whatsoever in this outcome. And then we will have to pray that the Russia is the Russia that I believe it is, not a vengeful Russia, not a Russia looking for expansion, but a Russia that will turn to the difficult task of rebuilding that which has been destroyed by this horrible war, and looking to find some way to get a new European security framework in place between Europe and Russia so such a war never happens again. But George, this war is over. It's tragic. I feel sorry for the Ukrainian people because we sold them a bill of goods. And the United States has a huge role to play here. But Boris Johnson's the guy that kept this war going. This war could have ended on 1 April. There could have been a peace treaty signed between Russia and Ukraine on 1 April that gave Ukraine all of its territory except Crimea. 400,000 Ukrainian men would be alive today. 20 million Ukrainians would have homes that don't exist today. Millions of children, and we understand the importance of education and stability for the education for the future of these children. These children are permanently displaced now. Their future is ruined. This is all on Boris Johnson. This is on the British people. This is on the United States. This is on the American people. This is on Europe. We are all guilty of condemning the Ukrainian nation to decades of pain and suffering.
A quite extraordinary interview, quite an extraordinary man, Scott.